Can I pick up on something? There was something at the beginning. I think it was Rob. You said when you were talking about misinformation and disinformation. Actually, maybe it was you, Candace. But I just wanted to unpick those because they're not the same thing. We often talk about them as if they're the same thing. But I mean, misinformation is just being wrong, and disinformation is lying. Those are different things.
Mhm.
And so when people, I think there's a tendency for, especially for governments, I think the way that people are talking about Facebook and so on at the moment, to sort of blame the users. But if you think about something like, people will share things that are wrong, okay, but we need to look at something like Fox News or Cambridge Analytica or something. These are people who are deliberately disseminating incorrect information on purpose for political gain, and they're paying a lot of money to do it, and they're paying off governments to do it. And so disinformation and the kind of an incorrect fact that somebody's sharing on Facebook is less the issue, I think, than finding out who these powers are that are paying for this stuff, and how they've been allowed to get to a situation where they can dominate the media quite as much as they are.
David, I am going to challenge you on one, the conspiracy theory I hear embedded in that logic. I think it's actually, so it's kind of interesting. So I think you're right that misinformation is the unintentional communication and spread of false information, either through a misunderstanding, right? Or a kind of missed set of facts. Sort of an incomplete picture is somehow being delivered to the audience intended, right? But there is an intention, and there's quite a lot of intentionality in spreading, for instance, COVID misinformation, in the sense that you're being part of a community. So coming back again to this idea of agency, right? Like you can be on Facebook in a parents group and have all kinds of ideas about whether ivermectin will be useful to give to your children so they can get back to school. And that's a certain, but there's an intentionality there, right? Which is like joining the community that embraces the idea of playing around with theorizing about what harm is not. Disinformation is not necessarily lying. It can be also, and this is a subtle difference, deception. And there's, kind of, which is showing the false and hiding the real, right? Which is, Barton Whaley, who's a theorist of deception tactics in military strategy, has spent his lifetime talking about this, and in fact studying magicians and how they use showing the false and hiding the real as a technique to give illusion. So, and you need not be a government actor in order to do that, right? Or to use that as a strategy for achieving your aims, which may or may not be political. Sometimes they're, profit driven. Sometimes they're power driven. Sometimes they're status driven. So I think we often think of, right now, we're in this kind of mold of like China and Russia. They do propaganda. We're learning now, of course, that France also apparently does, and probably the US does as well. But I think a much more subtler kind of approach to kind of defining these terms kind of lays out this idea that the real intent with disinformation is deception.